we did that on watercolor paper, and now we're going to start to think about the colors that we might need. So the colors that we see in the lemon are a pale yellow, that's Hansa yellow, that's the cool yellow. And in watercolor, you want to have all your colors mixed up ahead of time, because if you don't, they'll dry too quickly and you won't be able to go back and remix them while you're painting, particularly if you're in California, because everything dries very quickly here. Another color that we will need, the other yellow, the warmer yellow, is cadmium yellow. So we'll put some of that out too. We'll need both of those for the lemon initially, with enough water just to make them juicy, but not to make them too thin. Okay. Now, oftentimes I'll use a piece of tape on the paper, and you'll see that in all the videos, just to give an idea of how light or how dark these colors are when we first start to put them on the paper. We can compare them with that tape, because we can't tell when we put colors on white paper how light or how dark they are initially. Everything always looks too dark, sorry, when you put it on white paper. Just going to correct that edge just a minute there. Okay. All right, so we've got that, and then we need a little green, because oftentimes there's green on the edges of the lemon. Quite often you'll see a little green field, especially at the end there. So the green color we're going to make by using Hansa yellow and a little tiny bit of Prussian blue, and that's the darker blue that I have here. I'm going to make just a little light green tone. You don't need very much of that. Okay. Once you have the green mixed up, we're going to look for a little purple. And the purple, we're going to use Permanent Rose and a little tiny touch of ultramarine. Now, Permanent Rose is very strong, so don't use too much of that. You need to make it more of a blue-violet instead of a red-violet. And you'll always get a red-violet because Permanent Rose is very strong, so just be careful. Okay. Those are the colors that we're going to need to start with to paint the lemon. And then we'll use some of those colors in the background too. So you all have the handout, so the instructions of how to paint this are in the handout this time, but let's just go through it and we'll work on that. I'll put my lemon over here on the white fabric so we can look at it. And we're going to choose a light source. If you can see a light source, if you can see a highlight, that would be great. If you can't see a highlight, you're going to choose which direction you want your light source to come in. And today I'm going to have my light source come from this direction. I have a light over here which is making that happen. So my light is going to come from this direction. So the lightest area of the lemon then will be where the lemon connects with the light, which will be this area here. Okay, right about here. Now we don't want to draw around that highlight, because if we do, we'll be able to see that in the final painting and we won't be able to erase it out. But we're going to make sure that we paint around the highlight and make it white. Now I'd like you to watch everything first of all and then paint. Okay, so watch everything that I do and then you can follow along, and if you forget, then you've got the idea of what to do on the paper. So we're going to start by putting in the highlight. Okay. So we want to keep that light. And we're going to take that lemon, that Hansa yellow, the lemon yellow, all the way across. Right? It's very juicy. Okay, if your paint is too dry, you want to give it just a little bit more paint and a little bit more water because you need it to flow. Then I'm going to pick up a little cadmium and put that on that back edge, just a touch, while it's still wet. This is all wet in wet. Okay. So it has just a little bit of color back there. And now as I come down here, I'm going to start adding in some of the cadmium yellow into that lemon yellow. And what this does, because it's warm, is it brings the center of the lemon forward in space. And as I go down here, you can add in just the tiniest touch of cadmium red to your yellow on the side here, just the tiniest touch. And you can have a little more of a little orange tone. And make that just a little bit less orange by putting more cadmium yellow over the top. Okay, just a touch. And as we come down to the bottom, we're going to go back down to the cooler yellow and a little bit of green down here. Quite often there's green, and I'm going to put a little bit of warmer yellow over the top of that, just to make it settle down into the lemon. Okay, I'm going to put a bit more green in and just a touch of purple now in that bottom area to make a shadow. The tiniest touch, I'm going to loosen up the purple so that it's lighter with water, and I'm going to put just a little of that in that shadow area. So I've got green and purple down there. If you need to, use a little yellow to help to connect it to the rest of the lemon. Okay, and don't swish it around too much, just put it on and leave it there. It will do what watercolor does and paint itself if you let it. If you feel that you need just a little bit more warm tone and your paint is still wet, you can add that in here. Okay? If you feel that you need a little bit more color and your paint is still wet, you can add that in too. Just a little more of the cadmium, and go back and just use a little more of the lemon yellow too. So providing your paint is still wet, you can do that. If it starts to dry, you need to stop. Okay, how did that feel? Scary, huh? All right.
Trisha,
So
whereabouts did you put the orange?
okay, so the orange goes in here in the
Okay.
center of the lemon, and it brings that lemon forward towards you.
Okay.
And we can lose this little edge down a little bit if you like, make that just a little bit lower. Now everything I'm doing is wet in wet, and we practiced wet in wet in the sky last week, and we practiced it in the bird initially, because this is the way that watercolor works best. If you can get your handle on wet in wet, then you'll be able to paint more interesting watercolors, because that's when you let watercolor do its own thing, it works really well. So just by using those colors, we've got a dimensional looking lemon, and we're not even finished yet. This is just the first layer. Okay, let me go over that again. You're going to paint around the highlight with Hansa yellow. That's the lemon yellow. Then while that's still wet, pull that down just a little bit, and you can add in just a touch of the cadmium. And while you're waiting for that, you're going to go back up to the top and add just a little bit of the cadmium yellow around the top. Okay. Then you're going to add in a little green down here and a little purple. And I pulled that back just a wee bit too much, so I'm just going to pop a little bit more purple in there so that I don't, it's still wet, so I don't have that edge that I see there. Okay. As soon as it begins to dry, you need to back off and stop. So work fairly quickly, and whenever you're ready, you can start. And then we'll take a look and see what you've all done. And oftentimes you need to do this 2 or 3 times, okay? So this is going to be one of the things that you're going to practice this week, is getting these colors to work together and getting a dimensional feel just with the color. And this is almost like a formula that you can use for lemons and for other subjects too. Once you understand how the light falls on a subject, you can get there a little easier. You will have the opportunity of adding in a little bit more color if you don't get it quite the right tone afterwards, but you want to try and get it as close as possible in this first layer. And we'll be adding a little more green to this and a few other things when it's dry. So the issue with watercolor is usually how much water and how much paint. And the more you paint wet and wet, the more you get a handle on how much water and how much paint to use. It takes a lot of practice. Okay. Almost there? Yeah?
Yeah.
Kathy, are you done?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, I'm done. I'm ready.
Okay,
Thank you.
let's put you up on big screen so we can see what you're doing. Okay, can you show us? Can you hold it up?
Okay, it's still pretty wet.
Okay, looking good. Good job. Okay, great. Sandy, can we take a look at yours? See what you're doing. Good, nice job, Sandy. Yep, you got it. Marcy, let's take a look and see what you did today. Okay, great, good, yes. You guys are listening really well today. Excellent. Teresa, let's take a look at yours. Good, nice job. Okay. Now we will have the opportunity to change and add a little bit more warm or a little bit more cool. Julie, let's take a look at yours now. Okay, good. So yes, so we can add a little more cool or a little more warm as we go, right, when it dries. So let's stop on that one now. We're going to move down to the banana. And this one we're actually going to put the shadow in as it's still wet. So let me just go back up to my big screen. Oh, sorry, I'm not there yet. Let me move to, there we go. All right. Okay, so everybody's okay with that. Let's let that dry down, get away from it. That's the other thing with watercolor. You need to get away from it and not work on it while it's still drying. Because if you work on it while it's still drying, you will absolutely spoil it and you'll absolutely have an overworked painting. And that's one of the big things that you have to sit on your hands to prevent doing that, because it's a really big deal. Watercolor works much better when it's really fresh. Okay? So if you've ever worked in other mediums like oil or acrylic or gouache or any of those mediums, you'll know it's not the same thing. Watercolor requires that you leave it alone once it's done, and then you come back after it's dry to paint more. You can add more later and continue to make it look fresh. If you continue now, you'll just mess it up. So that's why we move on to something else. Okay. Now what we're going to do with the banana today is we're going to do a similar thing. We're going to paint the cooler yellow on the top like this, holding the highlight, okay, for whichever light source you're using today, and you choose either way. We're going to add just a little warm cadmium orange across here. Right? Cadmium orange is the red and the yellow mixed together. Okay, so you could use just cadmium yellow, or you could warm it up just a little bit. If your banana has a fairly warm feel, then you might want to warm it up with just a little bit of red, like I did on the edge here. Remember? On this side, we're going to paint the whole banana in the yellow, in the warm and cool yellow, and immediately while it's still wet, we're going to put that purple shadow over the top. Now the purple shadow on top of the yellow will become a sort of grayish shadow color that has nice interesting color in it. If we were to paint the whole banana and then come back and put the shadow in afterwards, it's not going to look as integrated. It's not going to look as good. And then we can also use that purple for the cast shadows in these two subjects too, because they are the complementary color to yellow. Okay, on the color wheel we have yellow and yellow orange. Let's go around so you can see it more easily this way. We have yellow and yellow orange. That's what we're using in these two areas. On the opposite side of yellow and yellow orange, we've got the violets. We've got blue violet and violet. Okay, so we can use any of those to make shadows and to make it more interesting. Normally shadows would be gray perhaps, but they're much more interesting when they're the complementary color of the subject. Okay, so let's do something similar with this one. Don't worry about any of the marks yet. That's all detail. We don't want detail. We just want the subject right now. Now, my banana, as I said, is a little too brown. It's getting browner as we speak. So I'm going to use my lemon for the top, my lemon colors for the top. I'm going to use that idea of taking the color from this and adding it to that. So make sure you have enough of your colors mixed up again. Go back into your palette and mix them up so they're juicy, right? Nice and juicy, so they're flowing very easily in the palette. They're not dry. And one of the ways that you do that is to keep your palette sprayed all the time. So all the time while I'm painting, every so often I come in with this spray bottle and I hit the surface like this to keep the surface of the paints wet. And that way you will get a nice fresh watercolor. If the surface of your paint is dry, you're struggling all the time to try and get the paint in the right consistency. So I know I'm going to need a little orange, so I will just put in a tiny little bit of red on the edge here of my yellow, right, and make that orange right on the corner and leave it right there. And then I know I need the green because there's a little green in bananas too, so we'll mix up a bit more of that. That was Hansa yellow and Prussian blue. Okay, make that sure that's ready to go. And then the purple, same thing again, permanent rose plus ultramarine blue. Okay. Make sure the purple isn't too dark. Add plenty of water to it. And one way that you can you can use a little test idea to see how dark it is in relation to the tape. Okay, we need it to be just a little bit lighter than that. We need it to be about the same color as the tape. So that's about right. When it dries, it needs to be about the same color as the tape. So not too strong just yet. Okay. Just a little bit more. There we go. Now we're there. So this one in the center is about right. Okay, so you can test that and make sure it's not too strong. So just get the colors mixed up and then we'll go from there. And oftentimes when you come back to a drawing that you've done, you see something else that you'd like to add to it or put into it. Or you can do that too before we start if you want to. Okay. Once you have your colors mixed, then we're going to go back to the same idea. So the reason we're doing these two together is because you can use the same process on these, and it just makes sure that you understand how it's working. All right, so my light is coming from this direction, same as the other one. Just put that light source up there on this direction. So my highlight is going to be kind of around here. As the light falls down on this direction, the highlight's going to be somewhere around here on this one, that sort of area. Okay, could be a little further across. If you see it further across, that's fine too. Start with the idea of Hansa yellow. Watch again before you paint. And this time it's a bigger area, so I'm going to make sure I work a little faster because otherwise the paint's going to dry as I'm talking. Leave that highlight as white. Highlights always work better as white paper rather than white paint. Okay, a little bit of cadmium on the back there. Same idea, just a touch, but more cadmium here towards the front. We want to bring this area forward in space, and that warm color will do that. Right? Just blend it in. Make sure you don't have a sharp edge there. And then I'm going to use both of these colors down here, just a little bit of the Hansa to start with. And then a little cadmium on top. A little bit more Hansa in there. Okay, so that's going to be our color that's under the shadow. And we can take this out here, just a touch of green in here, and then the browns we'll put in afterwards. Don't worry too much about those. There's a little touch of green on the edge here too, quite often on a banana. Okay, now the shadow goes right over the top of this wet paint down here. And that looks way too dark right now, but it won't be when it's dry. And it's all wet in wet. Okay, and that's going to dry down to a lighter shadow. You'll be able to see. While that's still wet, we can add in just a tiny touch more of this warmer tone on the top here, just to get a little interest in the colors. And just blend it in. If it's beginning to dry, this is just beginning to dry over here. Now I have to stop because I'm going to mess it up if I don't do that. Okay, so get to that stage and then we'll go from there. Okay. This is just the first layer. Remember, we've got more to do on this. We've got detail and all sorts of things to do on this yet. Remember, your purple doesn't need to be too dark for the shadow. Okay, this is lightening up as it dries. And it's going to be a nice shadow color by the time it's finished. I'm just going to mix up a fresh purple for the shadows while I'm waiting for you. That's about right. I'm going to make up a little bit of a darker green with Hansa and Prussian. It all looks a bit dark right now because it's right next to the white paper, but once we get the shadow in, we'll be able to see that more easily. Okay, you ready to move on? Yeah? Kathy, are you good with that? Let's take a look.
Yeah, I'm good.
Can you show me?
Yeah. I think I'm getting my paper too wet because it's bleeding a lot.
Yes, just a little bit. Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. And that's kind of a, timing thing that you have to, or an amount of water thing that you have to get used to. Sandy, let's see what's happening with you today. Oh, you're on mute. Okay, so your shadow's just a little bit too light, Sandy. Well, if it's still wet, I'd put another layer of that on, okay?
Okay.
Otherwise, you can add it later if you want to, but if it's still wet, you can add it now. Okay, Marcy, let's take a look. Okay, yes, that's just about right. Good. Okay, nice. And Teresa, looks like you have good control. Teresa, good. Yes, your shadow looks just a little bit light on both of those, Teresa. We can add a little bit more when it's dry, okay?
Okay.
Don't add any more right now, but I'll show you how to do that later. Julie, let's take a look and see. Good. Nice job. Okay, great. You are good to go. Have you painted in other mediums, Julie?
Really?
No? Not really? No? Okay. All right. Sounds good. Let's go to back up to big screen here. There we go. All right. Okay, so now we're going to go back to, make sure you're not putting your arm over the top of the wet banana, but we're going to go back up to the lemon here and finish it off, and then we'll add a background in here. Now, to finish it off, we need a little bit of detail, so we need a small amount of that green maybe on the edges here, just a little touch. Just a few little touches of goodies will make this come to life now. And on the other side too, quite often there's a little yellow area, depending on how fresh your lemons are. These came off the tree this morning, so you can see a little bit of green in there, but not too much. I think I'm going to put just a tiny touch at this end too, and just soften it off so it's a soft edge. Just the tiniest touch. And then that dark area, you can use purple for that. A little tiny touch of purple in there to make that divot that you see here where it comes out of where the stem comes out. Even though it looks brown, you don't have to use brown. You've already got purple in the painting. It's a good idea to use the same colors throughout the painting. The sort of detail that you can do on the surface can be minimal if you want to. On the surface you can add just a little bit of yellow here, the tiniest amount of purple to that, or orange. It doesn't matter whether you want to go with orange. Either way, you can use these. And you're going to do a few little dots on the surface to get a texture. Then the idea is to do just a few, but mainly around the highlight, okay, not everywhere. What I normally do with things like this is I put those textured dots in. Let me just go a lot closer so you can see what I'm doing here. I put those textured dots in like this, okay, and then I take a Kleenex and I blot them back so that they're not too strong. Okay? And then you get just a little tiny bit of texture on the surface there. And if it's too much, you just take your damp brush, go back in, okay, just loosen it up a bit, and blot a little bit more. And that's enough of a surface. You really don't need too much texture there to make it look like a lemon. This is not a botanical. If we're doing a botanical, that's a whole different ballgame. We do want it to look really like a lemon, not with this one. Okay. And while that's up nice and close, we can do the shadow, the cast shadow on that too. And that will be in this nice purple tone. Quite often, that purple that you've mixed is going to be too bright for a shadow. Okay. So the way to dull this down just a little bit is to add a tiny touch of the yellow. I'm going to use the cadmium yellow just to calm it down just a little bit, to gray it down just a tiny touch. Okay. Don't need too much of that. You can also use raw sienna for that. And quite often I use raw sienna for making these grayed purples. We did that the first week. Okay, so there's that grayed shadow color. I'm going to test that on the paper, make sure it's not too dark. That's going to be about right, I think. And cast shadows can be cast shadows. They can be the shape that you see on the subject. So if I put this on here and open up my screen again, you can see that cast shadow shape coming out here. You can choose that whole shape to paint, or you can paint up to the edge of the lemon and soften off that edge away from the lemon. If the cast shadow is going to be too much of an eye grabber, then I usually soften down the edge and don't make it quite as long as I see it in reality. If it's part of the design of the painting, then I do make it a feature, but more often than not. Now the cast shadow is going to be opposite the highlight. It's going to be on the side of the lemon. Okay, it is opposite the highlight. And we're just going to paint that in as we see it. And it kind of comes up just a little bit to here. And we can guess a little bit for this. Paint it right up to the edge of the lemon. Keep it nice and juicy. The key with cast shadows is absolutely juicy paint. Juicy paint means it's flowing very, very easily. Okay, now we'll bring that out, away from the lemon. And then you can decide how wide you want that to be, whether you want it just to finish with an edge like that, which feels to me just a little bit too sharp and too solid. So what I'm going to do now is just rinse my brush, put it on the sponge, and soften off this back edge. So it's not too eye-grabbing. All those sharp, dark edges are going to grab your eye. So I want to make sure we don't have that happening. There we go. So put a little cast shadow there. I'll just add just a tiny bit more on this side. Put that shape. There we go. That's better. Remember, if you're going to soften an edge, you need to rinse your brush, put it on the sponge so that it is not too wet, okay, before you soften the edge. And you can see that we don't need too much more detail on the lemon itself. You could add a few more if your shadow is not quite dark enough. It's nice to have this reflected light in here, that works well. If your shadow isn't dark enough, you can add that in on the lemon afterwards, once you've got the cast shadow in. And we're just going to move away from the lemon then, while we have this cast shadow idea in mind, and put the shadow into the banana. And I think I might need just a little bit more paint, so I'll just mix up enough to make that work. There we go. Good idea to have another piece of paper to test your colours on. Old paintings work well for that. Okay, so I'm going to start with my shadow coming out this way. And it's going to kind of echo the shape of the banana as it comes around here. It could be close to, or it could go beyond. If you see the shadow go beyond, you can do that too. Bring it round this way. And this time I'm going to give a little bit of a gap in between the object and the shadow. edge come down there. Maybe just a little bit wider overall. Let that dry down. We have a few more things to do on both of these yet. Let's add a little edge here to the napkin, just to make it more interesting. I've watered down the shadow color just a little bit more to make it lighter. And in here, I'm just adding a little bit of shadow underneath. And then I'm going to add an edge, a light edge, in a broken line along the edge of that fabric. And can you see the creases on here? It kind of makes it look a little bit more like fabric too, so we can add a few of those really light little creases in there that give us the impression of fabric. That's really all we're looking for, is the impression. So the area that's between is a little bit darker, and those little pleats, those little shadows, are a little bit lighter. Okay. I'm going to make sure I got all of the colors mixed up again, so we can do a little background behind the lemon. And then we'll come down and finish the banana in the same way. So using all of the colors that we've used already, we're going to make an interesting background back there. Again, this is wet in wet, and I'm trying to do a lot of wet in wet in this class this time, so that you get used to that idea of letting the paint do its own thing. I'll take that tape off for a minute. And here's where I'm going to use my number 10 brush, because I want to wet the paper up really well. And I'm going to wet up the background Let's make sure that doesn't go into the lemon there. Make it shiny wet so that you can run some colours on top of it. This is very similar to the bird that we did. Okay, and in the corners too. All right. Now once that's in and it's started to settle down, don't work on it while it's too shiny. Let it just start to soften down into the paper, and then you're going to run the colors that you've already used across that background. I'm going to start with a little yellow, and then I'm going to add a little bit of the yellow orange. And then I'm going to add in the purple. A little green too along the way perhaps. A little green in here. Now we can start to think about those colors going in different directions too. And the last color that you'll add on is the purple. Need a nice contrast back here to the lemon, and that's why we're using a darker background. Just keep dropping the color in, knowing that it's going to dry lighter. Okay, so you want to keep adding color. To get it just a little bit darker than the lemon. And you can vary the colors. You can go back in with a little bit more yellow, go back in with a little bit more purple. Make sure you have enough color mixed up for this. I'll show you a slightly different way to put the background in on the banana. So controlled wet and wet. This is a wet and wet. Okay? I'm going to do a controlled wet and wet on the banana so you can see just a little more option. So just keep moving the colors around until you get something that you like the look of. And you have enough variation of interest. It's going to dry much lighter because it's a wet and wet, so make sure it's dark enough. Good idea to have a little bit of dark behind the highlight in that area. You can use it to shape your lemon a little bit too if you need to. I'm just going to continue that down here. So this is a true wet in wet background, and we're going to do a controlled wet in red and a banana in a moment. A bit of variation of brush strokes and possibilities. So I did all of that with a number 10 brush because we wanted it to stay nice and juicy wet. Adding a little more detail onto the lemon there. And just a little tiny bit darker tone in the shadow of the edge of the napkin. You can put a few shadows on the top of the napkin if you want to. Very, very pale purple if you want to do that. Just a few little suggestions of fabric. Very, very, very pale, so you can hardly see it. Just a little texture on the surface of that would be interesting. also do just a tiny little bit of a warm tone there in the foreground on the fabric if you want to. Just a little reflection of the green, the yellow. So there's one more thing we need to do now. For any still life where we have an object that sits on the ground, like this, a bottle or a piece of fruit or a vegetable or whatever, you need to put a line next to, right underneath, between the shadow and the fruit, where the edge of the fruit is actually sitting on the table. You need to put this grounding line in. Can you see that very dark line that I'm painting in there? Right now, right under the lemon. See that dark line that I just put in there? So you want to put that in and then soften off the front edge of that with your brush. So it becomes not a line but just a shadow, an extra shadow in there. And that makes a huge difference to any still life. It's a little tiny detail that makes a lot of difference, and it stops it floating. I'm going to do the same thing while I've got this on my brush to the banana. Exactly the same. That dark line follows the shape all the way across, right up against the edge of the banana, and then we go back very quickly and just soften it down into the shadow. And that little detail makes a huge difference. Yep. So on the surface of the lemon, the fabric by the lemon, I put in just a little touch of yellow. Can you see that? A touch of warm, this warm color here. And I put in just a couple of shadows in the very, very light purple back there. And then if there are any pencil lines that you want to, that are around the edge, you can probably erase out some of those. But you won't be able to erase them out if they are within the paint. If you need to, right at the very end, I don't really need to, but I'm just going to show you how, you can go back and add in just a little bit more shadow like this, a little bit more color, right? Green if you want to, or purple, small amounts, and then just soften off the edges so they drift back into the area that you painted. If you felt that you needed just a little bit more shadow on the side, okay, you could put that in, and very quickly with a damp brush just soften off the edge. Very, very lightly. Okay, if you're going to do anything on the surface now, you have to be really careful not to be heavy with your brush. You're hardly touching the surface. Just giving a little extra shadow in there. I think I'm going to not put too much more in there, maybe just a touch more of this little shape in here. And I'll break that up just a little bit. There we go. A tiny bit of green back there. Just be really careful if you add to the surface of these washes now, because you're going to break them up and make it look overworked. I have a little bit of a bloom issue here on my shadow. I'm not too concerned about that, but if you do want to flatten that at any time, the way to do it is to use the flat brush, this one here. When you're making corrections in watercolor, this is the brush that you use, okay? Use a flat brush, put it in the water, and just lay it across the surface of the shadow. Very gently connect that shadow together. You can lose those edges that happen to be in there. Okay, just very, very gently. Do all the corrections in watercolor when the painting is dry, or when the paint is dry. Don't try to correct anything while it's still wet. That just gets you into trouble. Okay, so we're pretty much done with the lemon. A little bit of darker tone in here. A couple of places. There we go. Make the shadows just a little bit darker. Just the smallest amount. Yeah. And now we're getting that feeling of edge that you see on the fabric here. Just a little shadow underneath the fabric. And soften that off. There we go. Still life is a really good way to learn how to paint. Put objects in front of you and look at them and paint them. It's a really excellent way to go. Okay, let's take a look at your lemons as soon as you've done that, and then we're going to go back and finish off the banana. Julie, let's start with you this time. Let's put you up on the big screen. Where are you? Okay. Good. Okay, nice, Julie. So what I can see in yours is your background is really good. The shadow is really good. The shadow on the lemon has washed out just a little bit. Is that just because of the camera, or are you seeing that too? Let me unmute you. Yeah. Are you seeing that too, that it's looking a little flat?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the way to do that now is to go back and put in that shadow, that warm tone in the center, and the shadow at the bottom of the lemon. Okay, repeat that now over the top, because I think once you do that, your lemon's going to look a lot more dimensional, a lot more rounded.
Okay.
Okay?
Neat.
All right. So let's go to Teresa and see what you need to do. And Teresa, good. Okay. So your shadow at the bottom of your lemon is just a little bit too light. Now, it might be just the camera, because sometimes when you're holding it up in front of the camera, it looks lighter than it is. Does your lemon look dimensional enough to you, Teresa? Or are you seeing that shadow underneath is just a little bit too light?
Yeah, I think it's too light.
Yeah.
Do I need to wait, though, till it dries more?
When it's completely dry, yes, you can put
Okay.
we did a little bit of green, remember, over the top, and we did a little bit of the purple down there. And then
Okay.
if it goes too purple, you can add in a little yellow on the top of it while you're
Oh,
working
that's
on
right.
that,
Okay.
Same for you, Julie. You can do that too. You can add in just a little bit of the yellow on the top of the purple if it goes too purple or too green to make
Okay.
that work. Okay? And Marcy, let's take a look at you. We're going in the opposite direction this time. Okay, good. Yes, you have a nice shadow going there, good background. Your shadow under the lemon could be a touch darker too. What do you think?
Seeing that as you are saying that.
Yeah, you're seeing that too, yeah. And that is the hardest part of watercolor, is getting that. I try to paint generally things just a little bit darker than I think they should be the first time, because I know that the watercolor is going to dry lighter. And so that's why I use the tape a lot, to kind of test those colors, just to see how dark or how light they are. So it takes time, it takes practice, but you'll get there. You're doing great. Okay, Sandy, let's take a look at yours now.
It's too light.
It's a little too light. it's a little too light. But actually, you know, you've got enough shadow down there, I think, to make it work. I think you're okay with that. I wouldn't change that one.
Okay.
All right, Kathy, let's see how yours works. Good. Same thing, Kathy. You got washed out just a little bit in the center there. Looks a little bit like Julie's. Yeah,
here?
that's right. Right in there. Yes. So when
Okay.
that dries completely, what you want to do is just wet that area up again and lay in the colors that we laid in. And you've got your information on the handout, right, to tell you
Okay.
what colors we used. Yeah?
Okay.
Okay? All right. So it's just,
Okay.
and the reason it dried out is because you had just a bit too much water in the paint. Yeah? Okay. All right. So let's go back to my big screen now. And let's work on the banana. We have the fabric in there, so we can do a similar thing to the fabric. You can try that again if you want to. And I'll put this here so you can see the edge. Right? So we can just draw that little edge in. Let's make it a little bit more detailed on this one so we can add in a few more little extra goodies. And that little tiny edge that is stitched here. This one, right? This one. And I'm pushing this back a bit, so I'm getting something that looks more like this. Okay, just a little extra piece of edge there, more like this. Okay, and you don't need to draw in those little shadows. We can do that as we go. So they can go in there. We just want that little edge. And if you want to do it to the side too, I think we'll just do just two sides on that. We won't worry about the other. Let me just get my... Okay. All right. So you can leave the fabric. Let's put our background in this one first before we go any further. And then while that's drying, we can be working on the banana. So this time I'm going to use a number 8 brush for the background because I'm going to do a controlled wet in wet. A controlled wet in wet is a wet in wet where each section of the paint that you put on is wet, but the paper is dry. And so what happens is the colors connect together. So let's make sure we've got all our colors. We've got the cadmium, and we've got Hansa, we've got purple, and we've got the green. Okay, just make sure you have enough of those mixed up before you start. Everything dries very quickly, especially if you're working on a flat palette. So you just have to keep making up your colors. So I've got the green in there, just made up a little extra green, and I'm just going to make up the purple, just a touch more of the purple, and then we'll be ready to go. All right, now the colors are going to mix together on the paper this time, and so not on, so I'm going to start with some yellows, and I just put my purple into the yellow, so I'm getting a more muted tone for that. Let me start with a fresh tone for that. Okay. Nice juicy mixture. So starting next to the banana, instead of wetting the paper, we're going to let the paints wet the paper. So I'm going to start with a little yellow. I'm going to drop in a little green into it, and over it, and next to it. You can leave out the purple if you want to, but it's nice to have a dark background with the purple, I think. Just a little bit more. Add just a little more pink to the purple on this one. Make it just a little warmer, just a touch warmer. Okay. Now a little bit more yellow down here. And this type of background gives you more texture, more shapes, and a little bit more interest than just a flat wet in wet background will. So I'm going to outline this, bring in the purple now, outline the banana, bring in just a little bit more green along the way here, a bit more yellow, back to the purple. You really want the purple right along the edge of the banana so it pops out. And I'm using strokes that are fairly vertical, but I'm linking the colors together separately. You see that's giving a nice, interesting background, more interesting shapes in the background than we had on the wet in wet. I'm going to go back over here now, a little bit more purple. Let's outline that. Give it a nice smooth edge. Okay, now I'm going to come in with some more green over here. A bit more green on this one. Green's getting a bit muddy. Let's try a fresh one. There we go. A bit more yellow. And then we'll bring some more purple in there. And we'll outline the fabric as we go. There we go. So you can have it as patchy or as smooth as you like, depending upon how much color you put in, which colors you mix together. But it gives a little variation to the background that you don't get with the true wet in wet. So this is what I call controlled wet in wet. And now I'm going to put a bit down on the front here in these areas. Just a tiny amount of all of the same colors so it connects. Well, this could just be flat if you wanted it to feel like a table. Make this a little flatter so it feels more like a background below the table. A little bit of yellow, green. Okay. Let's put a bit more purple in here. Alright, I think I'm going to leave that nice and loose like that on the top. And now we're going to work on the banana just a touch. So let me give you a minute or two just to finish that off. Just mix up some fresh colour. If you want to know the colours that are in my palette here, there's a handout for that on the portfolio section. And basically I'm using the double primary palette with 2 reds, 2 yellows, 2 blues, and 2 earth tones. And that's what I'm using most of the time when I'm painting, but I have a few extra colours in here just that are helpful. But primarily I use the 8 colour palette and pretty much nothing else. So that will give you an idea of how things work. The 8 colour palette allows you to mix pretty much any colour you need. So apart from turquoise here, which I have in the palette right here, apart from this turquoise, I can make pretty much any colour with any of these colours. I keep a couple of lighter blues here that are the same type of blue. So Prussian blue is a cool blue, cerulean blue is a cool blue, but it's a middle tone instead of a dark. And ultramarine is a warm blue and cobalt is a warm blue, but again, they're middle tones instead of darks. And so I keep those on the palette just because sometimes it's quicker to get there. with those. Okay, all right. And again, if you make a little mistake here and you want to clean up, the flat brush is the way to go. Okay, use a damp flat brush just to clean up messes. Now you thought that shadow was too dark when I first put it on and it was against the white paper. Can you see now how accurate it is as a shadow? And now what we need to do is to add in some interesting marks on the banana. And so those marks are going to be made with the same purples. They look brown on the banana, but we don't need to use brown. We've already got a color that will work. It's the same tone. We can just add a little yellow to the purple and we'll get a brownish tone. Okay, so we can add just a bit more, make it just a bit darker. And so we can make these marks, and if we use the same colors instead of mixing up new colors, it actually works better for the painting too. So we're varying the colors just a little bit. So I'm being a little cautious about how many marks I put on here, and maybe making them just a little bit lighter in some places. So I see just a few little marks on the edge over there. So I'm starting to make this look like banana with the detail. And detail is something that you always paint on after you've got the form. The form is making it look dimensional. And after that, then you can add in the detail. Everybody wants to paint the detail first. That's just the way it is. Okay, you can add this same color can be used for the brown here because it's a dark tone, and that's really what we need more than anything. And we can add a little yellow into it to make it more interesting. Drop a little yellow into this, and you'll get a similar tone to the tone that you see on a similar color to the color that you see on the banana itself. Okay, on this side I see a dark end. Same idea, it's just a little bit of the purple. And by now my purple's got yellow in it because that's what I'm going from the yellow to the purple, so I've got a little bit of yellow in there, and that's okay too. Let's put just a few more marks on here to make it look more banana-like. Amazing how little detail you actually need on this. Once you have the shape and tones correct, that's about all you need. So I need a little shadow down here to make that change direction. I'm just putting that in. And you might see this a little bit more green on your subject. You might see a little more green in this area, so you can add that in if you want to.
Trisha, I've lost your video. I don't know if everybody else has or not. But
Okay, who's that? Julie? Kathy?
Kathy, yeah.
Kathy. Okay, Kathy, go back out and come back in again. It might just be your
Okay.
signal that had a blip there.
Okay, so just completely,
Yes, shut down and just come back in again, and you should be able to pick that up again. Okay, we're just about done with those details now. Better now?
Yeah, thank you.
That's okay, that sometimes happens. If you're on wireless, sometimes you can lose the connection. Okay, I'm going to add just a little more green here at the end of this one. And then I think it feels, if it feels like banana, then we can stop right there. If it's not feeling like banana, then you might need just a little bit more detail. But detail isn't what makes the subject work. Detail is something that you add afterwards. Really, really important to remember that. Okay. I've made a little mess on my paper here with my sleeve. So let me just clean that up. Right, let's do the same thing for the fabric that we did in the other subject. I'm going to make this just a little bit darker. Make it into a sort of grayed violet. That's not too strong. Just a little darker in there. And just pull it out to be a little shadow underneath, and that will pop that edge of the fabric up just by doing that. Just soften the edge. Okay, and then you can add in the details. It's a little suggestion of those shadows that are along the edge there. Very light. Tiny bit more of that shadow in here. You could also add, if you have a big space here, you could leave it open and you could add in another element, like a grape or two. You see what I put in this one? Some little red grapes. That's another possibility. You could do that. Or you can just put a few shadows in the fabric, either way. So it's up to you whether you want to leave that open a little bit more. Put a little bit of shadow in here, just a touch, just to give a feel for that fabric surface. And then add in a few of the warm tones too. Very, very light warm tone. So it would be cadmium yellow or cadmium yellow with a little bit of red in it to give it just a bit more warmth. And those little light warm tones help to bring that forward and connect with the colors that are in the painting and give a little bit more interest. So I put a bit too much on there, so I'm going to blot it back, and then it's just about right. Okay, use those tissues to blot and change things and make things the way you want. So the next stage of a still life like this would maybe to peel the banana, right? Open it up, give it some more shapes, and see if you can paint it like that in the same way. This one has a more interesting background, I think, has a little bit more of an interesting background because we use the controlled wet and wet back there. Sometimes if the background is a little too sharp against the edge, you can soften that off with your damp, flat brush. Just a touch more green in here. So what you learned today was that it's a really good idea always to get the dimension of the subject first before you start to worry about details, and that you can use warm colors to bring areas of the painting forward. This warm color through here brings that forward towards you, and a little bit of that warm color here does the same thing on the banana. And cooler colors will make the area go back in space. So the cooler color in the shadow here makes it go back in space a little bit more. And under here too, makes it go back in space. Okay, let's take a look. Kathy, let's start with you this time. See what you did. Yeah, I can unmute you from here. Oh, nice job, Kathy. Can you hold it back just a little bit towards you so we can see both of them? There you go. Yes, nice job. Which background did you prefer today? Sorry, I have to unmute
the colors or whatever, but I felt less, I actually felt like I had more control with the top one than with the bottom one.
Than with the bottom one, yeah. Yeah, you have less control with the bottom one, yeah. And you get more edges in the bottom one, and that's deliberate, so that you get a bit of texture in there, yeah? So that's a choice, okay? All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like you to do a couple more of these this week. It doesn't have to be lemons, but see if you can find something that is in the yellow tones. What else can we use? You could use oranges. You could just go a little warmer if you want to, but I'd like you to stay with these sort of colors for a while. So maybe just the bananas and the lemons for this week might be good. How about cutting the lemon in half and painting half lemon and a whole lemon together next to each other on the paper? That might be the next good step to go on this one. Sandy, let's take a look at yours.
I think I'm too light today.
Now that one actually came out pretty nicely. Your shadow's just a little bit too light, but it really looks like banana. Good job. Okay, and yeah, same thing. Your shadow's just a little bit too light. In fact, in the lemon, I would leave the shadow and just add a little warm above it, a warm yellow above it, and that would take care of that. Okay? All right. Okay, Marcy, let's see how yours ended up. Which background did you like best?
I had a hard, am I muted? I had a hard time with the second one. I'd like to practice that one a little bit. The first one I felt came out better.
Okay, you can go back over those backgrounds if you want to at any time when they're dry, after they're dry. Okay?
Okay,
Another
this one
layer.
needs help.
Yeah, another layer, yes. Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
That will even out very well if you go over it again, okay? So that's not an issue. All right, where are we? We're Sandy. Okay, so I need to come down to Teresa. There we go. Oh yes, nice job, Teresa. The lemon works really good at the top there. Your colors and your shadows work really well on both of them. Actually, you did a good job. Maybe the banana could use just a little bit more shadow. I'm not sure if it's the camera, but what do you feel when you look at it?
Well, I went back over the lemon because I felt like the lemon needed it.
Yeah,
now, I don't feel that way on the banana when I look at my banana. But I think I'll put it away from me and stand back and see if I still need to add more.
Exactly. That's a good idea. Okay, Julie, let's take a look at yours now. Good. Nice job. Okay, which background did you like best, Julie?
Second one.
You like that one? Yeah. It's more colorful. I think you're more of a colorful person. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, you like color. Okay, so put a little bit more color in your lemon at the top. You can have some more green at the base of it now, a shadow, right? You can use green for that. Maybe just a tiny touch of purple, but not much. And okay, and that will work well. Your top background is washed out just a little bit. So did you do a lot of brush work on that?
Probably too much.
Yeah. So as you work with watercolor more, you'll find that it's much better if you just leave it and let it do its own thing. You can always come back later, okay? And let me just come back and talk to you because you're talking to my hands right now. And so let's come back and okay. So that's the deal, right? With watercolor, the more I paint in watercolor, the more I leave watercolor to paint itself wherever I can. And when you're constantly brushing and trying to change things, you don't get that watercolor feel. You get more of an overworked feel. So just watch out for that, okay? If you use too much brushwork, that's what will happen. Okay, so we have just about 10 minutes. I'm going to talk to you about next week and give you a choice for next week. The type of subject that you would like, that you think you need help with. Next week is our last week, I think, on this series. So give me some ideas of the types of things that you like to paint or you would like to learn how to paint, and I'll choose out from those for our lesson next week. Okay?
Trisha, I definitely have a couple ideas. I know that we talked about feathers at one point, and so I think it would be fun to paint feathers. And the other thing is shells, seashells.
Oh, yes.
I really enjoyed, we did that years ago, and I'd love to try it again.
Okay. And Marcy?
I actually like the seashell idea a lot. That sounds like fun.
All right, I'll put another X by that one. Okay, how about Kathy? What do you think, Kathy? Hold on, can you unmute? There you go.
Sorry, I'd be interested in something maybe architectural.
Okay.
Possibly.
Okay.
But the seashell sounds like fun too.
Okay.
Good.
All right. Seashells is another still life, okay? And we can come back to that another time perhaps, but if we don't do it this time. Sandy, what would your choice be?
I love the idea of seashells, but I could almost see that a class in itself, like a series of classes to paint different kinds of shells.
Right.
I have problems with rocks. I have problems with trees. I always enjoy doing flowers because the shadows in the flowers I have difficulty with.
Right.
So I'm up for anything because I need to practice.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Julie, what would be your heart's desire for next?
I mean, these are very good ideas. Maybe trees.
Trees?
Trees, plants. Yeah.
Trees and plants. Okay. All right. So it sounds like, what about Marcy? Are you okay with trees?
Yes, I always love it when you have us do the birch trees. Those are fun. I also like the idea of something architectural. I've never, we've done a few things.
Okay,
but...
so we'll combine a little architecture with a little landscape with trees for next time then, okay?
Sounds great.
We'll go that way. And we'll come to the feathers later, Teresa. That's
okay.
Feathers are actually something that the issue with still life here is that I can't really light it in a good way so you can see light and shadow because I have to have the other lights on for the system here, so otherwise you can't see everything that you need to see. So I think that's what we'll do then, okay? I'll come up with a subject. I will put it in the portfolio by Wednesday of where are we? This week. Wednesday of, what day is it? Monday. We don't have a schedule, so we're losing track of times and days. So, okay, I will put it in the portfolio for you by Wednesday. I'll give you the drawing so that you can get that ready. Good idea to do, let's do 2 of those because it's a really good idea to paint more than one painting at a time, just like we did today, because you can be working on one while the other one's drying. We're working 5x7 so that you learn quickly in a small space how to do all of these techniques. If you like what you're doing, then the next thing is to scale up a little bit to maybe a 6x9. And when you're comfortable with that size, then you can scale up a little bit more to 8x10. But remember, when you scale up, you need to scale up the brushes too, because you can't paint an 8 by 10 with a number 8 brush. You need something bigger than that because the brush needs to hold more paint and more water. So, okay, I will come up with an architectural and will include either rocks or texture or something like that in place, okay? So I'll put that up there for you for next time. Any other questions? Are you good?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just to clarify the homework.
The homework, right. The homework is to paint more lemons and bananas. Okay. Preferably open the banana, peel it a little bit, so you've got another shape to work with, and paint the inside as well. Cut the lemon in half, so you've got 1 lemon and half a lemon to paint, and put it, and make sure you have a single directional light source. The light is coming from one window, okay, or one lamp, so that you can see the cast shadows. You haven't got multiple shadows. And that's the problem here, is I've got multiple shadows. So if you can do a single directional light source, bring those back next time. And also, if you want to, you have your code. You can go into a beginning painting now and find one of the beginning paintings and paint one of those. I'm trying to remember what the code was now.
BEG 2022.
Great,
was that
thank
it?
you. Yeah. Yes, did you write that down, Julie? BEG 2022. That code is valid until the end of the month, okay? So you can go in and you can choose from the beginning section. If you still think you need a little help, stay with the true beginners for a while, but you can go onto this site. On the YouTube site, Julie, you haven't done that yet, but you'll find out this little one to work on, okay? On YouTube. And my YouTube site is Trisha Reichert Studio. And I sent you a message from my phone, and the site is on there too. You can link from that message that I sent you on my phone, okay? And this Trisha Reichert Studio also has all the demos from the that I did for the Watercolor Society here, and also a little botanical fringe flower that you can do, that is a full video that you can do. And you'll see those right at the top because I did those fairly recently. So any other questions? Let's see if we have any other questions. No? Julie, how did...
Trisha,
yeah, go ahead.
Trisha, you mentioned that we could find the palette that you're using.
Yes.
Somewhere in the materials, but I didn't see it there.
Okay.
I just didn't locate it.
It's in the portfolio section.
Portfolio, okay.
Yeah. Excuse me. You don't have to be logged in to download from the portfolio. But on the site, you also have your own dashboard. You might have found that. You may not have found that. And the dashboard holds everything for you that you've already downloaded from other classes, any class that you take, any video that you take. All of that information will remain in your personal dashboard, okay? So the dashboard is under the menu. You can find that under the menu. Portfolio is under the menu on the home page. And you know that you have to scroll down to below the text to find most of the things that are there. This is an Australian site, and they work a little differently. They bring everything to you instead of taking you to another place. So everything comes to that home page. Everything will show up at the bottom of the home page. Everything you're looking for, except the portfolio. The portfolio is a little separate, okay? All right. Julie, I just wondered how you found me. How did you find me?
No, I think on YouTube.
On YouTube, okay.
I'm not even sure, but I think it was YouTube.
Okay, great. Oh, that's good. Yeah, it's kind of fun to find out where people are coming from and how you're coming. So thank you for finding me. And if you go to YouTube, please give me a little thumbs up or subscribe, and be kind of fun too. So then you'll get messages back to say when I post things, I think on YouTube. So that's how it works. Yeah. So okay, good day today. Yes, everybody okay with that? I think we're just about ready to finish up. So I will look forward to seeing you next Monday. Have a great week. Stay safe and stay warm.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
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 There we go.